Well, hello again. My name's Dennis Fansett, and thank you once again for tuning in to this, the third in our series of talks during Generosity Week. Now, many years ago, when my two daughters were both teenagers, I can remember my older daughter trying to negotiate some issue with my wife. I can't actually remember now exactly what the problem was. Maybe it was to do with how late she could stay out one evening or what she could wear to a party. I can't remember, but my wife was putting her foot down, and my daughter thought, as I'm sure all teenagers do, that we were old fogies, out of touch, not living in the real world of what's acceptable these days. And in desperation, the conversation not going her way at all, she turned to my wife and she said, "Mum, you're such a freak." And then, exhausted with that line of attack, she turned to me and asked me for my opinion on the matter, hoping that perhaps I might side with her. Well, as I said, I can't even remember now what the issue was, but I do remember thinking that it was really important that whatever my wife was saying, I had to back her up, and I needed to back her up to the hilt. So I followed exactly the same line and said exactly the same thing. That was my answer too. And so then my daughter turned to me and she said, "Dad, you're such a freak too." To which my response was, "Hold on, Jenny. If Mum's a freak and if I'm a freak, then what do you think that makes you?" And there was a short pause for a minute whilst the penny dropped, and then our daughter cried out aghast, "Oh no, I must be a freak as well." Well, hopefully you find it an amusing story. I certainly do. In our family, we often repeat it and embarrass her in that way. But it has a serious edge to it, because you, me, we're all created in the image of a generous God. And because God is overwhelmingly generous, and because we are created in his likeness, well, what do you think it makes us? The theologian Bishop Tom Wright, and indeed other theologians before him, use an interesting phrase to help us understand the nature of Jesus, the Son of God. Yes, Jesus is the Son of God. We know that, and it is absolute. But what does it actually mean in practice? Well, Bishop Tom suggests that it might help us understand more deeply, and it certainly has done for me, if we consider the phrase "chip off the old block." It's an expression, an idiom of the English language, but it's used to refer to someone who resembles one or both parents, either physically or in personality traits. It comes from being able to tell the larger piece of wood or stone from which a smaller piece has been cut, because it has the same grain, the same texture, and it fits back into the original perfectly. So we might say, I knew he or she was going to do that because they're just a chip off the old block, meaning that's what their father would have done. Or I can predict how this person will behave because they're a chip off the old block. Again, meaning they're just like their father. And our Father in heaven is generous. Not just any old generous. He's overwhelmingly and comprehensively generous. He creates us in his own image, and he calls us to be like him, reflecting his personality, his character, his value, and his outlook. For all of us, whether we give or not, it must be our own choice. No one should ever force us or pressurize us. We should never, ever feel manipulated or cornered. Giving is about generosity. If my wife gives me a present and says, "Well, I had to, it's your birthday, it comes round time and time again every year," I don't know if I feel that appreciative. But if she gives me a present and says, "I love you," well, that's different. And yes, she may say it every year, and hopefully plenty of times in between as well. But it deepens the relationship between us. But if we count ourselves out of giving, if we say, well, giving is not for me, or it's not appropriate in my circumstances, then there is the very real risk that we deny ourselves the opportunity to understand a very important part of God's character and our calling as people created in his image. I also believe that when we discover the spirit of generosity within us, a little starts to go a long way. Now, let's be careful here. I don't want to over-push this point. It's something each of us must discover for ourselves, not be promised in advance and rely on, only to find that God has moved in another of his mysterious ways on this particular occasion. But whether it's like the widow who poured out her oil for Elijah, or the boy who shared his 5 loaves and 2 fishes with Jesus, Corrie ten Boom and her sister sharing her small phial of vitamin drops with other prisoners whilst in a concentration camp during the Second World War, each found that what they gave just never ran out. And there are doubtless many other examples across our churches too, when people have given in tears and discovered a little more deeply something of the grace of Jesus. Let's not exclude ourselves from the joy of discovering that we are created in the image of a generous God. Well, thank you once again for listening. Do come back tomorrow when we're going to look at how giving deepens our relationship with God. So don't miss it, and I'll see you again then. Thank you.